The standard price for video games may be increasing to $70 for the PlayStation 5 and next-gen Xbox, ending a long 15-year streak of $60 games. Back in 2005, how much were games, right? So with this topic, we may be going for a little bit of a different twist, going down a different road. We may be going back in time a little bit. I find this stuff very interesting, so definitely stay tuned. But before we jump into all that, I want to take a quick look at this Business Insider article. So they mention here, the first indication of a price jump on next-gen games has came with the announcement of NBA 2K21, costing $60 in current-gen consoles, $70 for next-gen consoles. Supposedly, just going to cost more money to make, right? You know, AAA games, the teams are a lot bigger. They do cost more. It's always been that way, but a lot of people are losing their shiz. They're like, $70, I'm out, right? I've never paid $70 for a standard edition game. We're not talking about limited editions or special editions, just a standard release game. And a lot of people are like, this is unheard of. I kind of beg to differ a little bit because these three games right here, back when they first came out in the early to mid 90s, I paid $70 each for these. That money's a little bit different compared to what $70 is today, but that definitely has a lot to go into. So we'll talk more about that in a moment. So further down in this article, they talk about how the last change with price increases came with the PlayStation 2 and Xbox generation to the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, where standard prices went from $50 to $60. Obviously, there's always a range. There's budget titles, games that don't cost as much and whatnot. But that's what they're saying. Those generations, it jumped up. And now it's looking like we may be jumping up again. Somebody's got to lead the pack. And this NBA 2K21 may be the ones that do it, and other companies follow suit, right? So we'll have to see on that. I'm not excited about a price increase on games, but like I said, it's not really unheard of from back in the day. So I've been looking through a bunch of articles, a bunch of ads, trying to dig up prices for games from back in the day, because back when the NES and the Super Nintendo was out, like, I didn't have very many games. When I started buying games for myself, it was a struggle, right? When I couldn't buy games for myself, it was like I would get a game for my birthday and maybe Christmas, and that was it. Like, I didn't get a bunch of games. And looking at some of these prices, I kind of understand why. And I started noticing a trend here. So you see a lot of these games are like $60 back in 93. This is an Electronics Boutique ad from August 93. These games were $60. Cartridge-based games, but I find something interesting as well going into disc-based games. You'll see that in a moment. But one of the trends I saw was Capcom games were always expensive. Right here, you have Street Fighter 2 Turbo, $74. And I've heard from other people that this game was even more than that in certain stores. $74. If you go to an inflation calculator, looking at from 1993 to now, $74 is $131 today. That is crazy, right? Games were expensive indeed, but there's something you could dig into a little further with that. So let's jump up to Christmas that year. Just look at another game, Acclaim's Mortal Kombat, $75. It always seemed like these games that were really hot in the arcade were kind of pricey. And then a lot of games that had like sports licenses, I noticed, were a lot higher than other games, like ABC's Monday Night Football, $68. I've seen plenty of examples like that where certain licenses and certain companies, their games just would be more money. Role-playing games especially, right? They were always more money. Jumping up to January 94, Electronics Boutique, you got some stuff here. Koei's Romance of the Three Kingdoms, $73. RoboCop versus Terminator, $68. The license, obviously, right? Back in the 90s, RoboCop was huge. Terminator was huge. This one's kind of neat, this case for this game. It actually looked like that. It was like a plastic shell that went over the cardboard box. Game's not that good, but crazy expensive game, right? I think maybe part of that would have been because of that plastic cover there. So that was January 94. Now you jump to spring 94, a few months later, another ad that they had. And this just kind of cements the fact that Capcom games were expensive as hell. Saturday Night Slam Masters, $70. Mega Man Soccer, $65. King of Dragons, $65. Eye of the Beholder. I remember buying this, but I think I bought it used. Maybe it was like a lot later after it came out, because I don't remember like being like, holy crap, I spent a lot of money. Because I remember when I bought Final Fantasy 3, it was like I spent my own money on it. Other games I wound up getting as gifts and whatnot. But I remember this one in particular because I bought it from Babbage's and I had the receipt for it up until like a year or two ago. I lost it. I was using it as a bookmark because I bought the strategy guide with this from Babbage's with the game the day it came out. This was $70. Strategy guide was $13. It was nearly $90 with tax. It was freaking nuts. I had to bust my ass to afford this game. Nobody was buying it for me. I had to earn money. I had to, anytime I was walking around town, check the newspaper machines for quarters, the pay phones, all that stuff, find cans, go turn them in, whatever. I had to do what I had to do to get me some Final Fantasy III action, right? It was crazy. Looking at these prices, it's like, yeah, I can understand why I didn't get as many games back in the day. But then the one argument too is people would say cartridges were just more expensive. Up until disc-based games came out, like those prices went down. As you see, I mean, we could just average a lot of these Super Nintendo games were like 50, $60, just depending. Some of them were 70. Always Squaresoft games were $70, but a lot of games were still $60 or a little less if they were on sale. But we could just say the average was $60 back then. So jumping ahead a bit here, Christmas 95 with the Sony PlayStation, disc-based games. This kind of goes against that the games were cheaper than cartridge-based games at the time because they weren't. They were cheaper to manufacture, that's for sure. But for sale in the stores, at first, they were definitely around the same price. You would see $50 to $60 price point. With the long box games anyway, you'll see a lot of this. $60 for Mortal Kombat 3. Going into the inflation calculator, $60.95, $100 today's money. Pretty crazy stuff. And you'll see a lot of these games. There are some that are listed at 50, but there's a lot of them that were listed at 60. You'll see here, there's a bunch of $50 games. And then moving up a little bit, I believe the next one, there's a bunch of $60 games. I mean, it was kind of a wild west with pricing on a lot of things, but a lot of games back then, they were between that $50 to $60 price point. Cartridge-based games, yeah, there was a lot that were a bit more expensive, but it seemed like the average was around 60. So yeah, you could look at that, look at the inflation, be like $100. That's a lot of money that you were spending back then. Jumping up a little bit further to 97, Christmas of 97, you do see a lot of games started going down, $50. They were no longer long boxes, they were in jewel cases. And I've noticed with a lot of these that I've looked at, the prices had gone down. They were starting to average around $50 for AAA new games on the PlayStation 1 anyway. Now, I do have some other ads. So looking at something like this Sega Genesis ad from Toys R Us, $83 for virtual racing. That is unheard of. After coupon, mind you. Yeah, it's a special chip game, costs more to manufacture. Unheard of to today. You don't buy a standard game for $83 after coupon. What game can you think of that you're paying that much money for? It's just not happening. So there are some examples. Games were definitely more expensive back in the day. Then when you adjust the inflation, it's pretty nuts. But then people are looking at a $10 increase as like the end of the world. But you got to go a little further than that. People are complaining $70 is a lot of money. Shit, I would complain if I paid $65 for Shaq Fu back in the day. That is just ridiculous. When you look at a lot of this stuff, it's interesting. There's a lot of details that you wind up uncovering. Arcade ports like Street Fighter 2 Alpha being $70, Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 $70. It was a wild west out there. A lot of Capcom games, sports games were a lot more expensive with specific licensing. But the problem is when you go back and you look at that time period and what the federal minimum wage was, and you compare that to now, and you look at, you adjust for inflation, there's almost no difference. Now, more than half of the United States, the federal minimum wage is a lot lower than what the state minimum wage is. So that's something to consider as well. But definitely for a lot of people, their buying power compared to back then to now is weaker. It's just weaker because so many other things have increased in price. With games remaining around the same, floating around, hovering around, they just seem more expensive than what they really are because the wages that we earn don't reflect that inflation for a lot of people. And then the other thing you have to consider too is a lot of us were kids back then. A lot of us were teenagers or young adults. We weren't buying all these games for ourselves. A lot of us didn't have that concept of what money really was worth at the time, right? we started learning that, but a lot of kids didn't know. You just wanted to play games. Myself, I didn't get a lot of games growing up. Like I said, Christmas, birthday, that was about it. Rented a lot of games, that's for sure. And you just really don't realize what something is worth and the cost behind it until you have to earn that money yourself, right? So for a lot of people who want to be entertained, a $10 increase for a game is a lot of money when you really think about it. You know, not everybody's going to complain, but a price increase, nobody wants that. Nobody wants it. Is it about time that they increase the price? I'm no one to say that. I know games are expensive and have been becoming more expensive to make. There's got to be a point where with the graphics powerhouses behind this stuff, you're not really going to notice a difference. And I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff coming out for the PS5 and the new Xbox, but are people going to equate what they see with that, you know, that price increase for value? You know, is it justified what it costs to make the game? It probably will be, but the consumer may not see that. So it's going to be a very strange thing that I'm curious to see how things pan out. Are games going to, you know, go up to $70 and then stay there? Or are some companies going to, you know, stick their toe in the water? Because $10, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but for a lot of people, they will have to scale back, myself included. I have to be a big boy and be like, you know what? I'm not going to buy every game that, you know, that tickles my nips for a second, right? I'm going to have to really pick and choose what I buy, knowing that I'm going to put in time and actually play the game, get, you know, my money's worth out of it. And a lot of people are going to have to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how companies react to this. Will some of them boost that price up and then lose sales? And then people just like, no, that game's $70. I'll just buy it for the PS4 and, you know, forget it. I'll wait, because games always go on sale too. A lot of AAA games, they come out, you know, currently $60 and then 3 months later, they're $40. It just happens. Black Friday every year. That first half of the year, games come out, they're full price. You get to November and they go on sale quite a bit. So I know a lot of people out there are just going to wait on sales and whatnot, but really curious to see how this pans out. So I think this is an interesting topic that we could really be diving into on, you know, money and that kind of stuff, comparing it to the past to what it is now. We could be going into this for days, but I'm really curious to hear what you guys got to say. So drop a comment down below. And with that said, I really do appreciate you guys. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace out, bye-bye, and boom. Bye.